September 21, 1931. London. The governor of the Bank of England sat at his desk, pen trembling above the document that would end 200 years of British financial dominance. The pound sterling, the currency that ruled global trade since 1815, the money that financed empires, the reserve currency held by every nation on earth, was about to be severed from gold, not temporarily, permanently. By midnight, the pound had lost 25% of its value. Within 5 years, Britain would lose India. Within 10 years, the empire would be bankrupt, borrowing from America just to survive. Within 30 years, the dollar would replace the pound as the world's reserve currency. But here's what should terrify you. The pattern that destroyed the pound, stage by stage, crisis by crisis, is playing out with the dollar right now. Britain thought they were different. They thought the pound was too big to fail. They thought their empire would last forever. They were wrong, and the math says we're next. There's a pattern in history that kills reserve currencies. It's happened 3 times in the last 400 years. The Spanish real collapsed in the 1640s. The Dutch guilder collapsed in the 1780s. The British pound collapsed in 1931. Each time, the same 7-stage sequence. Each time, the dominant power refused to see it coming. And right now, the United States is in stage 6 of 7. Let me show you the pattern. Before we examine what happened to Britain, you need to understand what a reserve currency actually is and why losing that status is catastrophic. A reserve currency is the money that countries around the world hold as their primary foreign exchange reserves. When your currency is the reserve currency, every nation needs it to conduct international trade. They must constantly buy your currency. This creates permanent structural demand regardless of your underlying economy. This gives you 4 massive advantages. First, seigniorage. You can print paper and exchange it for real goods from other countries. You print money. They give you cars, electronics, oil. Second, cheap borrowing. Because everyone needs your currency, they buy your government bonds. You can borrow at lower rates than your economy justifies. Third, exported inflation. When you print money, the inflation spreads globally because everyone holds your currency. Your problem becomes the world's problem. Fourth, financial control. You can weaponize your currency through sanctions and asset freezes. These advantages are enormous, but losing them is catastrophic. When your currency is no longer needed for trade, demand collapses. Your government can't borrow cheaply anymore. You can't print money without causing immediate domestic inflation. Your living standard, inflated by decades of privilege, crashes back to what your actual economy can support. This is what happened to Spain, the Netherlands, and Britain, and it's beginning to happen to America. The pattern that destroys reserve currencies follows 7 predictable stages. Stage 1. Dominance established through economic and military superiority. Stage 2. Overextension begins as imperial costs rise. Stage 3. War or crisis creates unsustainable debt. Stage 4. Currency stress forces debasement or abandonment of backing. Stage 5. Alternatives emerge as competitors build rival systems. Stage 6. Confidence cracks as holders diversify away. Stage 7. Collapse happens suddenly when critical mass shifts to alternatives. These stages don't take centuries. They take decades. Spain went from stage 1 to stage 7 in 90 years. The Netherlands in 130 years. Britain in 116 years, from 1815 to 1931. The United States entered stage 1 in 1944. We're now in stage 6. And history says stage 7 comes 10 to 20 years after stage 6 begins. That puts us somewhere between 2030 and 2045. Let me show you how the pattern actually played out 3 times before. Spain discovered the Americas in 1492. By 1550, Spanish conquistadors had seized the richest gold and silver mines ever found, Potosí in Bolivia, Zacatecas in Mexico. Silver flowed into Spain at unprecedented levels, 200 tons per year by 1550, over 400 tons annually by 1600. The Spanish real became the world's reserve currency. Every merchant wanted Spanish silver. It was trusted, widely accepted, and backed by seemingly unlimited precious metals. Stage 1. Dominance. Stage 2, overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere simultaneously. Against the Ottoman Empire, against France, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England. By 1580, Spain had military commitments on 4 continents. The cost was staggering. Half of Spain's revenue went to the military. Stage 3, debt spiral. Spain borrowed constantly from Italian and German bankers. By 1557, Spain declared bankruptcy. They defaulted, restructured, and kept borrowing. They declared bankruptcy again in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. Stage 4, currency debasement. Spain started mixing copper into silver coins. A coin supposed to be pure silver became 50% copper, then 75% copper. The real value plummeted. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained barely any silver. Stage 5, alternatives. Dutch, English, and French merchants created their own trading systems. They stopped accepting debased Spanish currency at face value. Stage 6, confidence collapsed. By 1640, Spain was producing almost nothing. All wealth flowed out to pay for imports. The silver was gone. The debt was unpayable. Stage 7, collapse. The Spanish real became worthless. Spain went from global superpower to regional power in 50 years. They never recovered. After Spain declined, the Dutch Republic rose. Amsterdam became the trading capital of the world. The Dutch East India Company was worth $7.9 trillion in modern terms. Dutch ships controlled Baltic trade, Asian trade, and New World trade. The guilder became the reserve currency. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange, founded in 1602, was the world's first. The Bank of Amsterdam, founded 1609, was the most trusted bank on earth. Everyone held guilders because Dutch finance was the safest and most liquid. Stage 1, dominance. Stage 2, overextension. The Dutch fought 3 wars with England between 1652 and 1674. They fought multiple wars with France. Military spending soared. The Dutch economy, based on trade and finance, couldn't support large-scale land wars. Stage 3, debt accumulated. By 1700, the Dutch were spending more on defense than they earned from trade. Stage 4, currency pressure mounted as competitors emerged. Stage 5, alternatives. Britain built rival financial infrastructure. The Bank of England, founded 1694, offered stability. London's markets grew. By 1750, British trade volume exceeded Dutch trade. Stage 6, confidence shattered. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, 1780 to 1784, was catastrophic. Britain blockaded Dutch ports. Dutch trade collapsed. The guilder lost value. Stage 7, collapse. By 1800, Amsterdam's role as financial capital had ended. London replaced it. The guilder remained a currency, but not the reserve currency. The transition took 20 years once Stage 6 began. Now let's examine Britain in detail, because what happened to the pound from 1815 to 1931 is the clearest parallel to what's happening to the dollar right now. In 1815, Britain defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. The Royal Navy controlled the seas. British industry dominated manufacturing. The British Empire covered 1/4 of the world's land and population. The pound sterling became the global reserve currency. Britain established the gold standard. Pounds were convertible to gold at a fixed rate. This made pounds as good as gold. By 1870, over 60% of international trade was invoiced in pounds. Every major central bank held British bonds. Britain had achieved what Spain and the Netherlands had before them: total financial dominance. But dominance creates overextension. Britain had to defend territory on 6 continents: India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. The cost was enormous, and competitors emerged. Germany industrialized rapidly. America's economy surpassed Britain's by 1890. Britain was spending more to maintain empire than the empire generated in revenue. By 1900, Britain was borrowing to fund imperial projects. The Boer War, 1899 to 1902, cost £200 million. That's 10% of annual GDP spent on a single colonial war. The cracks were forming. When World War I began in August 1914, Britain faced a choice: stay neutral and watch Europe destroy itself, or fight and bankrupt the empire. They chose to fight. World War I cost Britain over $40 billion. That's over $1 trillion in today's money. Britain borrowed from everyone, mostly from the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America billions. The creditor had become the debtor. Britain had financed the empire through the pound's reserve status. Now they were borrowing in dollars to survive. The power shift had begun. After the war, Britain tried to restore normalcy. In 1925, they went back on the gold standard at the pre-war rate. This was a catastrophic mistake. The problem was the pound was overvalued. British exports became too expensive. Manufacturing declined. Unemployment rose. And the government had to keep interest rates high to defend the currency. This destroyed the domestic economy. Workers suffered. Industries closed. But the government insisted on maintaining the pound's value to preserve its reserve status. By 1929, Britain was trapped. Keep interest rates high and destroy the economy, or cut rates and watch the pound collapse. There was no good option. During the 1920s, the dollar rose quietly. American banks gained business that previously went to London. The Federal Reserve, created in 1913, provided alternative financial infrastructure. New York began competing with London. By 1925, the U.S. held more gold reserves than Britain. By 1928, dollar-denominated trade was growing faster than pound-denominated trade. The alternatives were building. The Great Depression began in October 1929. Global trade collapsed. Countries began defaulting on debts, and critically, they began pulling gold out of London. In 1931, Austria's largest bank, Creditanstalt, collapsed. This triggered bank runs across Europe. Depositors demanded gold, and Britain's gold reserves started hemorrhaging. In July 1931, Germany imposed capital controls and stopped paying reparations. In August, Britain's gold reserves fell by £200 million in 1 month. In September, the naval base at Invergordon mutinied over pay cuts. Confidence was gone. By September 19, 1931, Britain was losing £2.5 million in gold per day. The Bank of England had days, maybe hours, before reserves ran out. On September 21, 1931, Britain officially abandoned the gold standard. The pound was severed from gold. The currency that had been as good as gold for over a century was now just paper-backed by a broke government. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. Countries around the world that held pounds as reserves watched their wealth evaporate. Trust in the pound, built over 100 years, died in 24 hours. Within 6 months, 30 countries followed Britain off the gold standard. International trade collapsed by 60%. The global financial system that had existed since 1815 was destroyed, and the process of replacement began. Slowly at first, then accelerating. By 1940, the dollar had surpassed the pound in reserve holdings. By 1944, at Bretton Woods, the dollar formally replaced the pound as the world's reserve currency. From the crisis of 1931 to replacement in 1944. 13 years. But the pattern had begun decades earlier. Stage 6 started around 1929, Stage 7 in 1931. Full replacement by 1944, a 15-year process. Britain never recovered reserve status. The pound exists today as a regional currency. Britain lost the empire, lost the reserve currency, and became America's junior partner. The advantages of reserve status, the ability to borrow cheaply, to export inflation, to maintain living standards beyond productive capacity, all gone. Now let's talk about the United States in 2024, because every stage that Britain went through, we've either completed or we're currently in. After World War II, America had 50% of global GDP. The U.S. military was unchallenged. The Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 made the dollar the official reserve currency, convertible to gold at $35 per ounce. The dollar was as good as gold because America held most of the world's gold reserves. Every country needed dollars for trade. The system worked perfectly. For America, check. But dominance breeds overextension. The Vietnam War cost $168 billion. The Cold War required global military presence. By 1971, America had printed more dollars than it had gold to back them. On August 15, 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became pure fiat currency, backed by nothing but trust. This is the American version of Britain's 1931 moment, except we got away with it for a while. The petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia in 1974 saved the dollar. Oil could only be bought in dollars. This created structural demand even without gold backing. But the overextension continued. Bases in 150 countries. Wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Trillions spent on empire. Check. The war on terror cost over $8 trillion. The 2008 financial crisis required trillions in bailouts. By 2020, U.S. debt was $27 trillion. By 2024, $36 trillion. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion per year. That's more than the defense budget. We're borrowing to pay interest on previous borrowing. That's the definition of a debt spiral. Britain did this from 1918 to 1931. We're doing it now. Check. In 2012, the U.S. used SWIFT to sanction Iran, cut them off from the global financial system. In 2014, limited sanctions on Russia after Crimea. In 2022, the nuclear option. Russia was cut off from SWIFT. $300 billion in Russian reserves were frozen. This was supposed to cripple Russia. Instead, it taught the entire world that dollar reserves aren't safe, that SWIFT access can be revoked, that America will weaponize finance. Britain did this in World War I, froze German assets. It worked tactically but destroyed long-term trust. We just did the same thing. Check. China created CIS in 2015, a SWIFT alternative. Russia created SPFS. BRICS nations are developing a common currency. The petrodollar broke in 2023 when Saudi Arabia accepted yuan for oil. Dollar's share of global reserves has fallen from 71% in 1999 to 58% in 2024. That's a 13 percentage point drop. Central banks bought over 1,000 tons of gold in 2022, 2023, and 2024. 3 consecutive years of massive gold buying. They're diversifying away from dollars. China reduced U.S. Treasury holdings from $1.3 trillion in 2013 to $775 billion in 2024. They're building alternatives, just like America built alternatives to the pound in the 1920s. Check. We are here. Right now. The SWIFT weapon was used in 2022. Within 2 years, de-dollarization accelerated faster than any point in history. Countries that aren't even sanctioned are reducing dollar holdings because they fear they might be next. The pattern says Stage 6 lasts 5 to 15 years before Stage 7. Britain's Stage 6 was 1929 to 1931. 2 years. Ours started in 2022. We might have until 2027. We might have until 2037. But the direction is set. Every indicator is flashing red. Debt at $36 trillion and rising. Interest consuming all growth. Alternatives scaling rapidly. BRICS expansion adding major oil producers. Gold purchases at 50-year highs. Dollar's reserve share falling. We're not approaching the pattern. We're deep inside it. Check. Britain went from Stage 6 in 1929 to Stage 7 in 1931. 2 years. The dollar might take longer because the global economy is larger, more complex, but the pattern suggests 10 to 20 years from the beginning of Stage 6. That puts dollar collapse, not elimination, but loss of dominance, somewhere between 2032 and 2042. What does that look like? Not the dollar disappearing. The pound still exists. It's just no longer the reserve currency. The dollar's share of reserves falls from 58% today to maybe 35% by 2040. The yuan rises to 25%, the euro to 20%, gold and others to 20%. A multipolar currency world. And when that happens, America loses all four advantages. No more seigniorage. We can't print money and buy real goods. No more cheap borrowing. Interest rates spike. No more exported inflation. Domestic inflation explodes. No more financial control. Sanctions stop working. The standard of living, propped up for 80 years by reserve currency privilege, adjusts to what the economy actually produces. That's a 30 to 40% decline. 3 times in history, 3 reserve currencies, 3 collapses, all following the exact same 7-stage pattern. Spain thought the silver from the Americas made them invincible. It destroyed them. The Netherlands thought their trading empire was too sophisticated to fail. It failed. Britain thought the pound was eternal, backed by the largest empire in history. It collapsed in a single day. And every single time the dominant power refused to see the pattern. They believed they were different. They believed they were exceptional. They believed the rules didn't apply to them. America is telling itself the same lies right now. We're different. We have technology. We have the military. We're America. The dollar is too big to fail. But the pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. The pattern is mathematical. You cannot spend beyond your means forever. You cannot weaponize your currency without consequences. You cannot maintain empire without productive capacity. You cannot avoid stage 7 once you've completed stages 1 through 6. The sequence is locked in. The only question is timing. Based on the historical pattern, we have somewhere between 10 and 20 years before the dollar loses reserve status. Maybe we reach 2040 before the crisis. Maybe it happens in 2030, but it's coming. And when it does, it won't be slow. It'll be sudden. Britain lost 25% in one day. The collapse, when it comes, will be fast. September 21st, 1931 changed everything for Britain. There will be a date, maybe in 2032, maybe in 2038, that changes everything for America. And most people won't see it coming. Just like most British citizens in 1930 had no idea their empire was about to collapse. But you know now. You've seen the pattern. Spain, the Netherlands, Britain, all followed the same sequence. And the United States is following it right now. Stage by stage, warning sign by warning sign. If this opened your eyes to where we actually are in the sequence, subscribe. Because when we hit stage 7, when the dollar loses its dominance, you'll want to understand what happened and why. The answers aren't hiding in the future. They're written in the past, and I'll show you where to look.